Hey, good night. Good night. A minute late. That's not like me. Guess what, folks? Action packed day. Had a lot going on. It is a crazy day. But tonight we are going to be covering digital assets, trends in compliance and regulation. Now, if you are here in the BVI, let me just fix this because, like, literally, I just crashed in on this. If you are here in the BVI, you would know that I have been facilitating a number of lectures at or community college, a number of trainings, compliance focused, and leaning big time into my passion. And the most popular one to date was the digital assets trends in compliance and regulation. And I was surprised by how many people were really, well, kind of, yeah, kind of surprised because it was focused. My hair looks a mess. It was focused on compliance topics, and yeah, I have one tomorrow on sanctions compliance training, and I have one when I have the compliance officers workshop, and then there will be some things in the future. Now, if it is that you are in in the space, right? And you're curious about getting some training. The thing is that the trainings are virtual, with the exception of the compliance officers workshop. The good thing is the compliance officer workshop, I'm going to have a bit more on that in the coming, I don't know, maybe days. So I'm entering into a really busy period of time. And that's because my birthday is happening next week. So it's not that I'm not paying attention, but I might be a little distracted. So I see that my feed is up on one of my things. So let me share that now to make sure people can jump in. Um, making sure that I got the exposure that I need. Yeah, live now. Live now, people. Um, and I have an urgent request here, so let me just deal with it. Um, One second. This is like real life. And did I mention that I might need glasses? Had a funny interaction in the office here the other day where I was trying to work on something, and I went down to my friend to get her reading glasses, and it was like, have I not been seeing all this time? Crazy. Anywho, so tonight's topic, we are going to be talking about digital assets, trends and regulations. I'm a little bit late. Let me get this formally going. I don't even have my little seat cushion, so I'm a little lower than usual. But looking at the video, it seems as though that this is a better angle for me. So maybe I'll do without the seat cushion. So this is my last live event for October. At the end of October, I'll be celebrating a birthday. I'll be making 24 with an additional year of experience. And what am I going to do for my birthday? I don't know. But I'm going to be leaning into something that I'm passionate about. At least that's the hope. Maybe, just a luxuriant spa day, maybe just sitting by the beach. I love the sea. So there is that. Something with great energy. I love awesome food. So maybe I go somewhere and have, an epic brunch and then a lovely dinner and just close the evening out. I'm off from the Tuesday. So the Tuesday is my birthday and off for the rest of the week. But the rest of the week, the second and the third, I'll be doing the compliance officers workshop. Now, tonight, in terms of digital assets, there's so many things that are in the digital asset space. And if you're really switched on, you'd be paying attention to the Sam Bankman-Fried trial. And Sam Bankman-Fried himself with FTX was supposed to be on the stand today, being examined and cross-examined. I haven't seen any of the usual YouTube bloggers that I follow or vloggers that I follow, so I haven't had any details on that. But in my YouTube shorts, I've covered some bits and pieces as the trial was progressing. So there is that. But let me get this back on the rails. So, the live. Welcome to those who have joined the live, and welcome to those who are listening after the lives. I want to give a huge shout out to all the new subscribers. I see the numbers are still going up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is nothing but love here from your unconventional regulator. My name is Simone Martin. If you've never met me before, I am a financial services regulator by profession, but I do a lot of things. I have been an adjunct faculty for almost 2 decades now, and that is in tandem with being a regulator. I used to do Sislocks in a former life. I don't do anymore because, back issues and other pressures. I am trying to make sure that I get back into blogging. So I was a blogger, and I am looking forward to an exciting rest of 2023 and into 2024. Now, with all of that said, tonight's topic is, of course, going to be a sexy one. Digital assets are all the rage, but as with anything, there's also always scammers and bad actors around. But also for those who are curious about this space, maybe you want to know more and you want to get a better awareness because this is the future. This is a place that you should definitely check in with, because in the coming weeks, I will be probably developing some sort of a course or something, it might be where I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be something to help people get a better understanding. I've had a number of persons ask me for more than a year now to do exactly that. And there are a lot of fintech courses out there, but some of them are like, we don't necessarily need to be at, like, we want the basics and we want it from you. So if this is something you want, you're watching live, drop it in the comments, or drop it, like, connect with me on LinkedIn and DM me and let me know, because hey, this is the world we live in. So definitely something that I'm considering. Now, in my experience, I've seen a lot of things. More recently, in the last few years, I've played in the digital asset space. I've actually helped to craft legislation in this space when I was on a secondment in Anguilla. And if you're ever curious, do your due diligence on me. My LinkedIn profile is very much available, Simone E. Martin. Go and find that, and or just ask me the questions. And in talking to, so I've also had the opportunity to speak at a number of conferences and engage with innovators and dev teams, and I've had some insight from their position on how they want to see their applications and the tools and APIs that they're developing work. But I've also seen some of the concerns coming from the law enforcement side in relation to how people are being defrauded not almost every single day in relation to digital assets because people don't know enough about it. Now, this isn't necessarily an educational course in terms of, this is Bitcoin and this is digital distributed ledger technology, and this is what a digital asset is, and this is what an NFT is. This is not that live. And if that's the live you're looking for, again, drop it in the comments below. It's not that it can't be done, just saying. But before I jump into tonight's stuff, let me get my usual disclaimers out of the way. I am a financial services regulator. I am not a lawyer, and I am not a professional advisor. And the views on this channel are definitely all my own and do not reflect the views of any international standard setting authority or regulatory body. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So what am I going to cover tonight? In terms of digital assets, it's good to look around to see what's out there. But of course, we're talking about trends in compliance and regulation. So we're also going to look at trends in regulation and concerns that compliance people may have. And then we are going to look at some of the evolving risks and issues that are in the space that are making it difficult for persons. Now, as I said in the beginning, I have a birthday coming up, and I'm not saying that for looking for gifts. One of the reasons that I'm saying that is because I share a birthday with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created and the white paper published on the 31st of October 2008, and it was seen as a libertarian movement after the global financial crisis, where people were very concerned about what had happened with the traditional banking system and how that had collapsed. And of course, there were a lot of poor, we can look back, hindsight is 2020. There were a lot of poor decisions, poor actions. We could go back and critique government, but people were making the best decisions with the information they had at hand. Maybe they could have made better decisions, but there were a lot of things that were impacting that for sure. What I would say is that a lot of people latched onto Bitcoin because there was a lot of lost trust, lost love as it related to the traditional banking sector. So Bitcoin got its start back then, but of course, it may be the first, but it definitely wasn't the only one. No. They're saying that Bitcoin was created by a person who goes by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. In recent videos, there's talk about Bitcoin. There actually being 4 Satoshis who were actually interviewed by US federal agents. There are some Bitcoin maximalists, and in the space, there are people who are really passionate about Bitcoin and nothing else. Or maybe they're passionate about Bitcoin and they might hold other coins, but Bitcoin is their whole come to Jesus moment. And by others who are not them, they are typically referred to as Bitcoin maximalists. It's almost like a cult type thing. And if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, this is not necessarily an attack against you. It's not, but examine all of your behavior against the behavior of somebody who's in a cult. I'm just saying. But with that said, Bitcoin is not the end all. And with a lot of things, when you have the first of something, that is not necessarily the last of that thing. You can always improve on a particular technology, and a lot of digital assets have been created since Bitcoin that have improved upon the technology. A lot of those digital assets using code on distributed ledger technology, all of these terms, again, if you wanted like a really back to basics something, let me know. All of these blockchains have been created, and some of them have different ways of actually executing their function. So you have proof of stake, proof of work, and proof of authenticity. You have a lot of different configurations, and I don't profess to know them all. I am not a technologist. But with that being said, if it is that you pay attention, you would know that there's, I think, more than 10,000 different digital assets as it relates to just cryptocurrencies that are out there that people will buy into and people will trade as having a value. And there are some detractors of digital assets who are saying, we're just playing with monopoly money. And they're saying that, how can something intangible have a value? Well, in my former life as an auditor and as an accountant, I remember seeing this thing on the balance sheet called goodwill. And it was this value that was intangible based on what additional amounts would be paid for a company to buy into the shares, the stocks. So say you're acquiring the company and this company has done amazing things, and it might be worth $100, but because they've done so many amazing things, you'd be willing to pay $150 for it. The $50 would be goodwill, and it would be an intangible asset. So the concept of having something that you cannot actually hold on to having value is not a foreign concept in accounting. The difference now is that you have different digital assets that are created over, a period of time. And when we're talking about digital assets, let's bring it back into some of the terms that you might hear flung around. Let's start with central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Those are digital forms of an existing fiat currency. So you have the digital euro, which would be the digital equivalent. So they've basically put the euro on a blockchain. it's the same as. And so that falls under the remit of the central bank, which would be the European Central Bank, right? So you can also have the digital pound. So the pound sterling, Great British pound, that is then, so the digital pound is the digital representation of the UK currency. And it's not different other than the fact that it's digital. Again, it is in the remit and control of that country's central bank. For the purposes of the United Kingdom, it would be His Majesty's Treasury. The US would then also have their digital dollar if they can get themselves sorted out with their position on cryptocurrencies and digital assets, and that would fall to the United States Treasury, right? So those are central bank digital currencies. It's not issued by anybody else but the same issuer of that currency in that jurisdiction. Now, you have an interesting construct that's popping up with jurisdictions that have been dollarized, BVI being one of them, right? But it's not just dependent countries that are dollarized. I do believe that El Salvador is one of those countries that is dollarized as well. So they use the US dollar as their legal tender. Fact check me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But what can be done is that you would have a central bank digital currency issued by what would be the equivalent of their central bank. But it can't be that they're calling the US dollar digital as their central bank digital currency. So there are different discussions that are happening around countries who may have their own currency, but for whatever reason, the valuation is too fluid. So they might have hyperinflation. Zimbabwe is one country where that is often cited in textbooks. They might have a different treatment for that. So central bank digital currencies are one thing. Stable coins are something else entirely. Now, again, stable coins are pegged to a particular thing. So it could be pegged to a currency. So you have some stable coins that are pegged to the US dollar. You can have a stable coin pegged to a commodity. So could that stable coin be pegged to the price of light sweet crude at any given time? Sure. It can be pegged to the price of gold. Whatever the commodity is or whatever the currency is, it can be pegged to that. So it would have a one-to-one value, but that's an artificial peg. And to me, from my personal perspective, now I am not an economic analyst or theorist in terms of looking at economic theory. I do see stable coins as having the potential of having destabilizing impacts, because if it is that I am the issuer of a stable coin and I am pegging my digital asset, so digital asset, I don't want to use my name, but digital asset moon, because everybody talks about going to the moon. Digital asset moon, which is close enough to Simone, being pegged to the US dollar. In theory, I should have the equivalent of whatever stable coin I issue in the US dollar value that's in issue. That is a discussion that's still ongoing. And for avoidance of doubt, for those who may be watching now or later, yes, I am based in the British Virgin Islands. No, I am not regulating. No, I have absolutely no comments in relation to any stable coins or cryptocurrency exchanges that might be connected to or established in the British Virgin Islands. None whatsoever. And there's no inside information, nothing at all. This is just based on my research and my looking out there at the wider ecosystem as public citizen. No inside information here. But with that being said, you just go back to financial theory and financial stability concepts, which I kind of know something about because regulators are minded to ensure that you have the resilience of the economy for which they supervise, as well as their part in terms of stabilizing the global economic financial framework. Stable coins, I'm still not bedded down. I hold digital assets, so I hold cryptocurrencies. I hold absolutely zero stable coins. That is my position. So stable coins pegged to something, right? And artificially pegged. What's supposed to happen? So what in terms of those companies, in my mind as a regulator, I would want to see certain disclosures being made to say, well, we hold this, and these are the assets, these are the real assets that we hold in terms of collateralizing that stable coin, right? At least that's to my thinking. I could be wrong, and I have no problem with someone challenging that. But beyond that, you have a host of other digital assets that are out there for a lot of purposes. Some that I would really like to jump into, but I have only invested what I can afford to lose. I stopped putting in money into the space in 2001. So I've just been hodling since. And so there are people who have seen some of my past videos or heard the word hodl instead of hold or hodling. Holding. So hodl is an act. There are a lot of terms and sayings and slangs around the space as well. And there was someone, and I personally had to look it up because I'm like, I'm using bad grammar or improperly spelled things just because it's fancy. And there was someone way back in the day who was holding Bitcoin when it wasn't much of anything else to hold, and there was a lot of noise around Bitcoin going to zero, which often happens. And the person was tweeting or sharing on social media that this person said something, and these people are trying to get him out of his bags, but he's going to hodl because he was a little intoxicated, so he misspelled hold and as hodl, and that became like a thing in the cryptocurrency space. So I hold or hodl a number of cryptocurrencies. And I've been, like I said, I've only invested what I am willing to lose. With that said, I've invested, I won't give amounts, but I've invested the equivalent of one really nice Louis Vuitton bag. And I have, in terms of the valuation, I haven't checked recently, the markets are up, but in terms of valuation, I now have the equivalent bag, but maybe 3 or 4 times over. So people talk about trading. I don't have the time to trade. I don't have the patience, the time, or the resilience. And to me, you lose a lot more money trading. But in terms of the landscape, so you have close to or over 10,000. But what you would need to do if you're curious about a particular cryptocurrency, somebody says invest in this, and this is a opportunity for you to jump in on now. Don't get excited because you hear like 10x returns or 100x returns. You have that happening, but the probability of that happening reduces as time goes on, right? There's still an opportunity for that, but you have to do your due diligence. And so one of the things that is important for you to do is ask, well, show me the white paper, which is essentially the equivalent of the prospectus. What is that company engaging in? What have they been doing? And look at what the purpose of that particular cryptocurrency is. Because I find that when you look at the purpose of that particular cryptocurrency, then you can get an idea as to whether this is a going concern or somebody thought they had a good idea, but really it's not. And or is this something that we believe in? What a lot of people will take away is that there are a number of projects that have really good utility. And so to my mind, the things that will last really long are the things that people will use, hence utility, right? When you think about anything in life, right, you look for the utility of that. There are very few things that the average person, so the masses, we're not talking about the ultra elite. What are the masses holding on to and using on a regular basis? Are they looking to hold a Fabergé egg because it holds a lot of value? No, they don't have the security, and they don't have, well, let's start with the disposable income. They don't have the disposable income to invest in a Fabergé egg because it is priceless. And there are other things that you might want to invest your money in: real estate, and stocks and bonds and other investments, right? Real estate is going to be an interesting space in the near future with what's going on the planet. But you would be looking for utility. If you buy a vehicle, what is the utility of that vehicle? Are you going to buy a Lamborghini? No, even if you can afford it. and you are a family man or a family woman? Probably not, because that isn't exactly a family vehicle, right? You can't take the kids to soccer practice and come back. That is not practical. Practicality and utility, you can't use it for everyday living. So one of the things that I always fall back on is the utility of a particular project. That's one. In terms of another thing is that you have digital assets expanding into their different forms for the execution of smart contracts, and you had that on DeFi platforms. Now, DeFi had their their equivalent of a hot girl summer, I think, in 2021 into 2022, and then it just dropped right off, and they haven't been able to regain the momentum since. And that is because the scammers and the fraudsters, and even to some of the dev teams who developed a lot of these applications, were really excited. Some of them really had good intentions, but the coding, they had a lot of bugs, they had a lot of issues. And then in the coding, some of them didn't appreciate the need for due diligence. And some of them thought that, yeah, due diligence is a simple thing. I don't know what regulators are really worrying about, but let's just do this thing, ask for ID, and moving on. Not recognizing there are so many intricate elements to the actual due diligence process. And in the US, they call it KYC, right? Know your customer, but not appreciating that it went to such depths. And I'm not just talking this one out of my rear end. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of dev teams, particularly in the DeFi space over the past few years. So it is one of the things where some of them had projects and kind of sort of failed, and it didn't really work out. And they want to get this thing done because they believe in their project. And so my thing was like, okay, safe space, let's have a conversation. And if you're willing to share in terms of exactly what you did, I am willing to tell you what I think from my regulatory mind, to basically break down the nuts and bolts. And with that, that discussion was a two-way street. It wasn't just me trying to explain the regulatory concepts that regulators want to see being adhered to, but it was also me learning what development teams were really focused on and what were the things driving them to develop the things that the platforms and the programs that they were developing. So that was really enriching. And in terms of digital asset space, DeFi is coming back. Now, DeFi is decentralized finance, and I think that it has a really good future. And that's basically using platforms to execute certain smart contracts for the space of certain financial activities. But again, we could do a DeFi something on its own. We're focusing on digital assets here. And then we had the last thing, which was NFTs, non-fungible tokens, or at least the last thing I'll cover tonight, non-fungible tokens. And some of you might remember them in and around the context of cartoon monkeys. Let's go back to utility. Because in as much as when I was growing up, Pokemon was a thing, how many of us still have Pikachu lunch kits, shoes, collectible socks? Not too many of us. So is there utility in a cartoon monkey? Probably not. But the actual technology has a lot of utility embedded in it. And so NFTs are another space. I have to do a ton more research in the space. But NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and the tokenization of everything, that'll be its own thing. That'll be its own development. And I think that will also be transformative. Now, focusing just on the main cryptocurrencies that are out there that are traded for value, not necessarily in the esoteric forms of executing smart contracts and tokenizing real world assets for the sake of using those tokenized assets on a mutual fund or, hedge fund in other parts of the world to then change an illiquid long-term holding fund only to an open-ended fund that people can trade into and out of, is a different discussion. But what it means is that in a not too distant future, you will have a number of the advancements in the fintech space extend even more into the digital asset space. So if it is that this is an area that you're interested in getting into, I would definitely suggest jumping in now. Now, as it relates to the global regulatory landscape, let's start with FATF. It doesn't really start with them, but let's start with them. FATF is the international standard for AML CFT, which is anti money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, right? So that's what those letters stand for. And they put out a number of documents. I mean, all the standard setters were, they joined the group and they joined the chat about 2016 is when I think most of them got their engines going and then started to publish things about a year or two afterwards. And FATF put out a number of papers, guidelines for virtual asset service providers and all of that. The first one that they put out in 2018, 2018 or 2019, I had a lot of problems with. And they have since sought to get better understanding of the space with more public sector consultative forums and what have been put out in terms of guidance as well as their updates to recommendations 15 and 16, I think are helpful. I think they still have a ways to go, but I think it's good progress. The Financial Stability Board recently, this year, put out its paper in relation to the regulation of digital assets beyond AML CFT. And this is something that I actually spoke about long before they put out that paper, and there's a TEDx talk to prove it. There are prudential provisions that apply in the regulatory environment, for which, when you talk about fintech, it is easy to look at what technologists might consider the analog version of it and apply the digital concept to that space and then reconfigure the existing prudential supervisory framework for that purpose. It can be done. And in terms of how we move to that point, a lot of jurisdictions have put in a lot of sweat equity to do just that. Some standout jurisdictions to me on the other side of the planet includes Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and if I had to choose one more jurisdiction, who would it be? Let's leave it at Abu Dhabi and Singapore for the time being. Of course, the United Arab Emirates as a whole are doing a lot in the fintech space, and Dubai is the place to go for conferences. They're really rolling out the red carpet for the best talent and minds to come on in, and kudos to them. There are others who are not really developing their regulatory landscape as you would traditionally think, the US being a standout jurisdiction in that space. But that's a whole different story. But what I can say is that the regulators around the world, at least, well, regulators and law enforcement, are all having their different discussions. In the regulatory space, there's GFIN, the Global Financial Innovation Network, that is housed in the Financial Conduct Authority in the United Kingdom. And they have been going strong since about 2017. And I had a little bit of engagement with them while I was seconded to Anguilla. Anguilla became a member of GFIN. And, you have a lot of streams with which it's a regulatory space where you can be on different work streams, sharing what you're doing, so that you have that capacity building across the world. So whether you're a huge jurisdiction or a small jurisdiction, you have a lot of value to be added. There are some very small jurisdictions that have been punching far above their weight for a very long time, and they have been right there in the pool. So if you're curious as to some of the regulatory authorities around the world who have a more progressive leaning to fintech and digital assets, check the membership of GFIN. But I also mentioned law enforcement, and that's the other international development that has impacted the digital asset space. With everything, criminals are the early adopters. So you have a lot of scams in and around digital assets. And because it's so new, there are so many people who don't really understand what's legit and what's not. And even forget digital assets, even in the regular fiat space, regular paper money, there's still fraudsters who are really good and make it really difficult for you to tell whether something is fake or real. That's a legit something. So law enforcement have been busy at work to really disrupt a lot of these scams, and there have been a lot of positive progress in that space. Two of the persons that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, one I have, well, actually both I have yet to meet in person. One of whom I was supposed to meet in 2020, but we all know what was happening in 2020, when we thought we would have been outside and we weren't. And then another one is a more recent contact, and she's doing amazing work to disrupt these criminals. First is Bill Callahan, and the second is Erin West. And both are in the law enforcement space. Both are quite active on LinkedIn. So if you look them up and reach out for a connection request, tell them Simone sent you, and definitely connect with them if you're curious about their work. Now, not necessarily just giving them a shout out for the sake of a shout out. A lot of the things that regulators learn and sometimes will have to reconfigure supervision around is drawn from the cases of law enforcement when they look at scams. I mean, you look at scams and you look at crime, and you get a better sense of the typologies impacting a particular space. So, what are the risks? What are the vulnerabilities? And sometimes these vulnerabilities may have gone unnoticed. And so, this is how sometimes compliance methodologies are developed. Not necessarily because you had a really forward looking regulator who was able to see around corners. Sometimes you have that, sometimes that is not the case. But often, law enforcement comes in and adds real value to the engagement as it relates to detecting and disrupting what would otherwise be a very profitable scheme for criminals. Now, with digital assets, because they are digital, there are so many people that can get in, and money, the value, can move so quickly. So the scale and the scope of the issues are much more bigger. They're bigger. I'm looking for adjectives at this hour of the night, and clearly I'm failing. But they're a lot bigger than they typically would be with fiat currency. And so the real world impact means that digital assets can disappear a lot quicker than fiat assets. And there's some of the persons who will speak about traceability. The good thing is with blockchain technology is that the law enforcement have their own methods in terms of how to trace, track, seize, and obtain assets that were stolen, digital assets that were stolen, and value that went through the digital asset space. And they're not going to talk about that because they wouldn't just be educating the good players, they would be educating the bad actors as well. But from those safe spaces where you will have regulators and law enforcement sharing their knowledge, you will have A, the development of compliance and regulation, and B, the development of ways to detect scams and to educate the public and prevent them from being defrauded and scammed from different frauds and e-frauds. Fraud or electronic fraud, where they take over your monies and other property, because it might not be just money. They might just take title to some intellectual property, which in of itself could have millions of dollars in value. So there are quite a few things that, in my mind, are relevant for the space. Trends in compliance. What we're seeing is that because now the international standards setups have put out something, you see a lot of regulatory authorities now developing legislation if they've not done so before. BVI had something enacted earlier this year. I understand that Anguilla has enacted their piece of legislation. You have other places enacting legislation. Interestingly enough, you have some places enacting legislation, but not accepting applications. So you have that dichotomy. There will be a lot of fanfare with their promotional agency, but the regulator has enacted this, but they might have a little more capacity building to be done. Right? So that's a thing. But there's a lot of pressure. And two, what I find within the regulatory space, when you have a virtual asset service provider seeking a license in a new place, one of the things that I've heard anecdotally from persons who are not in the traditional financial services space, they expect things to be turned around a lot faster. And I think that that is a nature of the industry in which they work in. Things happen fast, move fast, break things. But they might not recognize that regulators are very pragmatic and stoic, and so they will not move fast and break things. Although I am of the view that they should move a bit faster and break a few things. Um, and not, not towards complete anarchy, but there's a learning curve for everyone, from the innovators who might be geniuses in their own lane. Guess what, people? You are not a genius of everything. Let me put that out there. So there are innovators out there who are thinking, right, I've created the equivalent of fire in the digital asset space, and I am brilliant, and so I'm bringing this brilliant product to market. And then you come to the regulatory ecosystem, and you might be as smart as a bag of rocks as it comes to compliance. Sorry to break it to you. It may be that you really took this as something more simple than it is, and I don't know why you would, but there are thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of professionals in the space who would tell you that that is not the case. So there are things to be learned from both sides. And equally, if it is that you come with something brilliant and you want the regulator to endorse it and approve it for licensing, it cannot be this esoteric thing. You have to be able to explain it to the people who are going to license it, and speak. And this is why, I speak about on Ignis. I speak regulation, do you? And I realize that a lot of people don't speak regulation. So there's a communication barrier in terms of what is needed at the end of the long day. What else can I say in relation to digital assets? We spoke about fraud. Um, Oh, in terms of risks and risk assessments and risk management, one of the good things is that in the space, you can use technology to help you detect the risks and issues in relation to digital assets. So because digital assets are for the most part on public blockchains, there are a number of persons who have developed APIs to help with the detection of, you know, misconduct. So there's certain things that would stick out as not regular activity or bad activity in relation to digital assets. Some of them are out there and they have identified themselves, and they do tweet about it. Now, crypto Twitter is a wild space. They do tweet about it in terms of what they're seeing. There were persons who were sniffing around Celsius and Voyager, which are a cryptocurrency exchange and a cryptocurrency lending platform that collapsed last year, I think it was. They were publishing that. And of course, people might be ignoring them at the time until they realize, what fresh hell is this? This has come to pass and this is an issue. So what else is there? So you can people are using AI in their systems to try and detect these things. Let's see what else. There's some other basic frauds, I think, that are crossovers from even before cryptocurrency was really a thing, like cloning websites. And you have the use of deep fakes now, where people are like, oh, send me cryptocurrency because you've put on Facebook and on Insta that you're on vacation in Punta Cana or someplace else, and then somebody calls your family while you might be out at a barbecue, or you might be out paddleboarding. Somebody's aware of your activities on vacation, and so that you would be incommunicado, and they would have this whole deep fake thing happening, where they call your family and say, this is happening and I need you to send money to me. And it might not even be a digital asset crime, but there are a lot of crimes that are still going on. And a lot of money that has been lost to criminality. But what do I want to leave? Well, a few things, right? Because not meant to be a long something, but compliance frameworks, regulatory frameworks are still being developed. There is, of course, a travel rule that you need to keep yourself apprised of. And that is the need for beneficiary and originator information in relation to the transfer of digital assets. You have the lovely sunrise problem where you might have the rule in one place but not in another place. And the analogy being that the sun has not yet risen on that place where the law does not exist for the travel rule compliance. But of course, then you're not supposed to transact with a place that doesn't have the travel rule, and not necessarily the country. It could be that a service provider in a country that does not have the travel rule in law is seeking to be travel rule compliant and has the provisions in place. So there is that. In terms of quick wins, there's a huge space for educating people in this space. If you know something about cryptocurrency and digital assets and you can teach, there's never been a better time. Go out and do it. Maybe save me a little bit of effort and I can focus on compliance. I don't know. But it is one of the areas where qualitative information is still needed. But there are a few last points to consider. Hey, I see you, DJ Militants. A few points to consider in terms of your compliance systems as it relates to digital assets. So remember, digital assets is not just Bitcoin, right? It's not just Ether or XRP, even though I love XRP, or XLM or Link or Algo or ADA or Atom. And I'm basically listing what I hold, right? And I could go on for a bit more. XLM, I have, I think it's about 24 different cryptocurrencies, right? It's not just about what you have focused your mind on. It could be any digital asset, but how well positioned are you as an individual to understand what digital assets can do for your jurisdiction? I see a lot of transformative powers. And if you're ever curious, you can look back to some of the content that I was a part of at Anguilla FSC. They have their YouTube channel. There's some good videos where we spoke up. We were planning a fintech conference in 2020 before, the planet went into chaos, but we've spinned it around into webinars. And so those are available to all of the public. And we speak on a whole number of issues, digital assets, data, and the like. So how well do you understand the digital asset space? And as I speak to you here, I know somebody is out there creating something right now that I'll probably be reading about tomorrow that'll be brand new to me. Can you benefit? Another question that I would have for anybody, whether you be an innovator, dev team, or regular Joe Blow, how well do you understand your regulatory space? That's another question entirely. And even prior to digital assets, when it was just the regular banks and insurance companies, we still have a lot of people who know about a regulator, but they don't understand the regulatory ecosystem. So I would implore you to understand what is required. It's important. It's important because things don't work in a vacuum. Is there any other element that you would need to consider for your business? So dependent on whether you are taking on clients that may have digital assets in their portfolio or want digital assets in their portfolio, are you well placed to have a conversation with them if you are, say, an executive with, name it, a bank, trust company, insurance company, mutual fund administrator? How well versed are you with that? Even to money remitters. Now, money remitters is going to be an interesting one for me. I'm here looking to see if I have any tissue because I'm sweating. Money remitters are going to be an interesting one because we have the banks who globally, many of them are not really interested or are trying to shun digital assets because they see them as a future threat to their business. But what happens when they don't embrace it, but then you have a company like MasterCard who will? What happens then? Because I can guarantee you at least 50% of the planet with disposable incomes have access to a MasterCard. What happens when digital assets are permitted to be, like if you hold them already and the banks are saying, yeah, you hold it and your crypto goes to the moon, but you can't get it back into the traditional banking system. That's okay. I could transfer that value to my MasterCard. what do you do then? So it's a lot of discussions that are being had. So the banks might be telling you one thing, but it's important to know what's going on in the wider space. And these things, digital assets are coming. Whether people, banks, people, businesses, right, they are coming. Everybody might not be prepared for it at the same pace, but they are coming. And then if you're interested in a job in this space, what do you need to know? There are people who can code. There are people who learn how to carry out blockchain analytics. There are people who learn about compliance. But one of the things I will tell you is that the rare bird is the person who understands cryptocurrency, compliance, and the key elements to on-chain analytics. I don't even understand all of those things. I understand regulation and I understand digital assets. In terms of on-chain analytics, not so much. In fact, let's just go with no. But those are the areas that if you're interested in getting in the space, get you some training. There are a lot of good companies out there. And if you're watching this after the fact, in all of my videos, you can find your way to connect to me through my company, Ignis Solutions, in LinkedIn, and it's in the description. But it's a very interesting space. And there were a lot of people. So going back to the beginning with Bitcoin sharing a birthday with me. We are coming up to another birthday, but Bitcoin is not the end all be all. And with that being said, it is going to be what? How many years is it going to be? 15 years that we have Bitcoin? It's definitely not the last. And the space is only going to grow exponentially after this. I think that if you're really interested, dive in. There are a lot of spaces to really research. It's a space I'm excited about. I'm excited about digital payment systems. I'm excited about not having to pay oodles of money for a wire transfer, even to send money from here to there. I'm excited about micro insurance. I'm excited about just better business opportunities for people within the Caribbean, us not having to wait a week to wire money for a supply of goods and services, or goods, say that, we're getting in goods to sell at a peak season. And, we have active hurricanes and the bank might not get it there in time. And then we miss the window and we miss the big event. And then what? We're struggling for the rest of the year. No, I'm looking forward to better days when we can be engaging with the rest of the world to not only buy stuff, but sell stuff. Because that's another element. If it is that the banking system with correspondent banking and de-risking that has happened over the years have made it so difficult, imagine how hard it is just to be a business in this region. And digital assets can actually fix that. So, guys, I don't know what else to say in terms of the trends that are coming. I think I've listed most of them. And it's not going to be the last one in the digital asset space. And funnily enough, there are certain words that I trip over when you'll notice even in my shorts, sometimes I have a problem saying digital, but this is the real Simone. And if you know, you know. But yeah, I am going to wrap up here. I just want to give a huge shout out to DJ Militants, who is always a big time supporter. He is a local DJ here, but he is a child of the Caribbean, hailing from Jamaica. So you're going to get your shout out because, you're the only one who jumped in on the chat. So big shout out to him. And definitely, I think he has Instagram and all that. Feel free to drop it in the chat. But there is a wild world of compliance out there. To make sure I help people navigate it, I also have a compliance membership. The information for that is also in the description. And yeah, Chasing Compliance is basically to help you understand some of the compliance tips and compliance issues, oftentimes faster than it takes you to review a compliance manual. And yeah, consider joining the membership. Definitely connect with me if you're looking at this after the live and after I'm sweating here on camera under this hot light. Definitely subscribe. Thank you so much. And I'll be looking out for you in November after my birthday. Have a good one, folks, and I'll catch you on the next one.